Good evening. My name is Gina Patetti. I'm the staff partner for Relay USA, and I have the privilege to honor our Relay USA survivors and caregivers this evening. Honoring our loved ones, our survivors and caregivers, is one of the many reasons why we relay. Our survivors. Cancer survivors are living proof that we're making a difference in the fight against cancer. They've endured days of illness, of medical appointments, and tears, yet they're here with us today as we honor their crusade against this disease. Our caregivers. Caregivers are often the unsung heroes in the journey of a cancer patient. They are a constant source of strength, encouragement, and most of all, support. In honoring our caregivers here with us tonight, please remember that a caregiver never stops being a caregiver. Even if the person they supported is no longer with us, the support that they provided is no less important. To start off tonight, we're going to hear from American Cancer Society volunteer and voice of hope, Ken Kraft, and learn about his caregiver experience and his American Cancer Society journey.
Hello and welcome to the Relay USA event. My name is Ken Kraft, and I just want to share a few minutes with you this evening. I've been a volunteer for about 6 years with the American Cancer Society, and initially, my wife and I were struggling with the news that her sister Nancy had cancer. And we wanted to do more than just be involved with Nancy. So I called the American Cancer Society and said, hey, we'd like to do more. And we started to get involved, and we learned so many things. I started with Real Men Wear Pink. We began to go to some of the events. And as that went on, Nancy's cancer progressed. So after about a year and a half, we were entrenched in the American Cancer Society. And about then, Nancy succumbed to her cancer and she died. We were hurt. My wife, who was her caregiver, was in need of the kind of love, really, that the American Cancer Society and you people do give. So we were happy that we had been involved for some time. Right then as well, my sister Kim Ray had cancer, and she was struggling with that, and she was in New York and we're in Virginia. But we tried to help her as best we could. Meanwhile, I became a member of several boards, some golf outings, some galas. I got on the board for the state of Virginia, and things just began to become more comfortable for us. Then about 2.5 years ago, I think almost 3 years ago, my sister Kim Ray died, and we were devastated. And at that point, I think that we still kind of felt a little bit of relief because there was no cancer that we were dealing with. Then 2 months later, we went to the local gala, the Cattle Barons Ball, and we had a great time. It was just a wonderful event. The following day, actually, my wife woke up with stomach pains, and we went to the hospital, and she was diagnosed with gallbladder cancer. That was in October of 2022. And it was something out of left field. I mean, we were involved with the American Cancer Society. We thought that cancer happened to other people, even in our family. And then my wife got it, and it just ended the world as we knew it. She right away, she said, I'm just determined to live 8 years, which was the amount of years that Nancy survived. But in a couple of months, those 8 years turned into 5, and then 3. And frankly, by the time Christmas came, all she wanted for Christmas was to hear her youngest granddaughter say the word grandma. She never did. As the new year progressed, things got very hard for her. We were doing chemo and radiation, and she landed in the hospital a couple of times with complications. And finally, we were in UVA for about 3 weeks. And I lived in the room with her. And on April 7th, she passed from gallbladder cancer. We were married 40 years. We have 2 sons and 4 grandchildren, and it was the most devastating thing I've ever been through, frankly. Since then, it's been 2 years. I went back to work to try to stay busy. It didn't really work. After about 6 months, I just didn't know why I was working, and so I retired. And when I retired, I became fully immersed in the American Cancer Society, and I began to speak all over the Southeast region. I became a co-lead for Voices of Hope, which is a speakers bureau for the American Cancer Society. I became the board chair for the state of Virginia. And I really believe that without all of that, I would not have healed. After about 8 months of that, I unretired. So now I'm working full time again, and really have kind of come to terms with what cancer is and what cancer does. And it's devastating. And I know that you know a lot about the American Cancer Society, but really the ACS is the preeminent organization that fights cancer. And without the American Cancer Society, things would be really tragic indeed. In fact, you know the facts. The American Cancer Society gets 4 stars out of 4 in a rating of all charities. They've invested over $5 billion. The real thing, though, is because of the work that all of you do with the American Cancer Society, we've seen a reduction of deaths by 33% since 1991. And I just want you to think about that for a few minutes. We've reduced deaths by 1/3 because of what you do. And because of that, obviously, today in America, there are over 18 million Americans alive with a history of cancer. And that, to me, is amazing. So I've continued to give back as much as I can, and I'll continue to do so. But for those of you struggling today, I would just say that we are all praying for you, and we all want to help you. This is a very, very hard thing to go through, but there is still beauty in all of it. And I've never met anyone who has grown substantially or exponentially without a story of pain. And I know that all of you have your own story as well. And but you can be blessed. You really can be. And I don't normally end conversations like this with this little tidbit, but I really just want to do this because, again, it's a Relay USA event, and there are people all over the United States watching. So let me just finish with this. This year in America, over 2 million people will be diagnosed with cancer. And when I started this, I used to think about cancer. When I thought about cancer, I would think about people who are suffering. I would think about caregivers. I would think about survivors. And that really was the extent of my thoughts of cancer. And now I think differently, because there are people out there that have no idea what cancer is, what it does, and they don't have cancer at all. But the truth is that 1 out of 3 globally will be diagnosed with cancer sometime in their life. So when you're standing in line at the grocery store with a couple of other people, one of you is going to be diagnosed with cancer in your lifetime. So this disease affects the entire population of the world. And back to the 2 million. So 2 million people this year will be diagnosed with cancer. And I promise you this, on that day, on the worst day of their life, when they're sitting in the doctor's office and they've gone through all the tests and they've answered all the questions and they're waiting for their results, and they're sitting in the office and the walls are white and the smell is antiseptic, and they're scared to death. And they look over at the door, and like a horror movie, they see the doorknob slowly turn, and the door opens, and in walks the doctor. And he walks in and he sits in his little rolly chair and he turns it around and he rolls up to them and he says, "You have cancer." On the worst day of their life, before the sun goes down, before that day is over, before their head hits the pillow, I promise you, their knees will hit the floor and they will pray to God for a miracle. Ladies and gentlemen, that miracle is you. That miracle is us. That miracle is the American Cancer Society and Relay USA and all the doctors and nurses and medical professionals and researchers that come together and raise money and do everything they can to fight this horrible disease. And today, I really just want to thank all of you for being a big part of that miracle. I appreciate the time. Thank you, and God bless you.
Ken, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your powerful words with us tonight. We really appreciate you being here with us. Now it's time to cheer on our survivors and our caregivers. We are first honoring our survivors. Our survivors this year range from those that are newly diagnosed to survivors that are celebrating their 54th anniversary of being cancer-free. And that's impressive and something to be celebrated. Our survivors that we are recognizing tonight represent over 800 years of survivorship, which is pretty impressive. After we honor our survivors, we'll honor our caregivers who have supported their loved ones on their journey. As you're watching, if you're a survivor or a caregiver, please share in the comments. Now let's celebrate our reasons to relay.